You know, Ultimate Spider-Man, wondering why Ultimate Spider-Man is new, it's different. It's a great question, obviously, because Activision and Treyarch have made a line of Spider-Man games. The way we feel is that Spider-Man 2 really kind of set the new trend for Spider-Man games. You know, the streaming city, the physical swinging, giving Spider-Man the freedom to travel through New York. So, you know, when Ultimate Spider-Man started off, you know, we knew that it was 2007 until Spider-Man 3 was coming out. We wanted to get more Spider-Man out to the public. In some ways, in the beginning, we felt like the younger brother of Spider-Man, the movie game. As this game started to take shape and take form, we realized that we have a standalone, amazing franchise on its own. You know, we brought to the table, first and foremost, as soon as you fire up the game, you notice the look. What we call 3D comic book inking, the way that we shade our characters, the heavy outlines, the musculature. It's just a vibrant, colorful, totally new rendition of the way that we draw on screen a Spider-Man game. Anybody who's familiar with Ultimate Spider-Man comic books will immediately see the game and say, wow, they took my favorite 2D medium, the comic book, it's Ultimate Spider-Man, and translate it into 3D with all the intricacies that come along with it, animation, sound effects, audio. You know, really took what these guys have done in 2D and brought it to a 3D medium. To accentuate that, there's the motion graphics that we use to do our storytelling. You know, most games, when they're scene animations, it's one camera, two characters, or whatever, an action event happening, and it's a pretty basic, you know, like you'd see in a movie still shot. We integrate all these panels that are sliding across the screen. We have characters that leap out of the screen, out of the panel at you. We do a lot of onomatopoeia where we animate words. You know, the word boom might appear on screen, and the B will start shaking, and the letters will drop down. So really our storytelling is just a very new, dynamic way of telling the story. You know, you add to the fact that obviously we have two playable characters. You have the good guy and you have the bad guy. That goes beyond Spider-Man and Venom, really just to the root of good and evil. The fact that a character is going to want to do good. They're going to want to save people. They're going to want to be the hero. But it's also fun. There's a hedonistic pleasure to being the bad guy, to throwing cars, to eating people, to breaking stuff. And it really, you know, we brought a lot to the table. Again, when we started, we felt like, here we are, we're going to bring Spider-Man to the world. And when we finished, we're like, oh my goodness, we've broken the mold. We've got a brand new franchise here, and everybody that's seen the game, that's played the game, ourselves, people at Activision, the press, you know, the gamers at E3 have all said, wow, this is a brand new Spider-Man game. There's no more question in people's minds about Spider-Man 2 Ultimate Spider-Man. We are our own franchise. Ultimate Spider-Man is going to be out at the end of September. It's going to be on the PS2, it's going to be on the Xbox, the GameCube, the GBA, and the Nintendo DS and the PC. I really believe this game has something for everybody. I mean, the homage to the comic book series is spot on. For the Spider-Man license in general, all the Spider-Man fans are going to love it, and I just think it's a great third-person action adventure game. It's just going to be, you know, gamers in general are going to love this game, and we really have brought to the table something that all people are going to be interested in. Yeah, I mean, Ultimate Spider-Man is just a truly reinvigoration of the Spider-Man license. We are co-creative directing with Brian Michael Bendis, who writes the comic book, probably the most famous comic book series going on right now. We've changed the art style. It's really important to us that our characters come out alive from the comic books. So we spent the first 3 or 4 months of the project working on the character shaders, and they have these beautiful heavy black outlines, and their musculature is outlined in what we call our 3D comic book inking. So really, the first thing is we wanted to make it look like the comic book. The next thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make it feel like a comic book. So we use motion graphics and these panels that we basically slide across the screen, and we do all types of storytelling in these 3D comic book panels. It's kind of hard to describe with words, but basically, in a normal video game, you'll have a cutscene and you'll have two people talking to each other, you know, and it'll be one camera, fixed camera angle. With us, we have multiple camera angles, multiple cameras. We actually slide the action across the screen. We'll have a small close-up of a guy in a box, and he'll actually dive outside of that box and run across the screen. It really just adds a super dynamic to the look of the game. He penciled all of our character designs. Like any character that we wanted to use, whether or not existed currently in Ultimate Spider-Man or was a new character that we wanted to introduce to the game, we basically went to Bagley and said, here's the character we want. You know, he worked with us. He gave us, you know, 30-plus character sketches, stuff that we haven't wound up using in the game, stuff that we'll never wind up using, but just, he's an amazing artist, he's prolific, and the turnaround is unbelievable. So basically, we gave Bagley an idea, he'd send back pencils, we would take that internally and do, you know, and turn it around and make sure that we could model characters off of it. He would get back to us with the color comps, we'd send those off to Marvel, they would approve them, and he basically designed the look of the characters in our game. I mean, it really is a testament to his talents, the characters in our game, and As you guys saw in the very brief demo, they look pretty killer. Yeah. We're working on it. We have a lot of solutions in place. I mean, there's the problem of 2 player characters, so they're each going to have slightly unique camera needs. You know, Spider-Man swings, so you need a special camera for that. And while Venom kind of does these bounding leaps, so he'll need his own unique camera. Basically, we do like any other process. We sit down together as a collective creative team. We put down the list of all the known issues with the camera, and then we get very talented people to sit and rework the camera code until it works, and then you scrap 80% of that and you do it over. I mean, something like camera, probably the only thing even close to camera as far as the amount of iteration that goes into it would be something like a combat system. And it really, there is no magic bullet for the camera. I mean, this is the 4th Spider-Man game we've made at Treyarch, and we continue to work on and improve the camera, and it really is an iterative feel, and it's based on the type of content you're trying to deliver, and it's a lot of work. You have my promise that the camera you saw today is not the camera we're going to ship with, but I certainly understand the fundamental and the importance of a camera, and it's something that we're putting a lot of effort into. You know, basically because it's fun to be Spider-Man, and it's fun to be Venom. You know, after years of making Spider-Man games, I still sit down sometimes just in my zen-like state to relax, and I swing through the city of Spider-Man. You know, we've updated the combat system. We have new attacks and kind of just a new take on Spider-Man's combat. It's frenetic. He's jumping off walls. He's, you know, it's really combo based in the way he's kind of bouncing from guy to guy. So, you know, we got all these cool gangs that are kind of unique to our world that are going to have their own parts of the city, and we really just want to make it so that when you want to take a break from the pounding, pulsing storyline, that you're going to be able to do cool, fun things. You know, we're going to have trick races and things throughout the city, and there's going to be stuff to find that's hidden throughout the city, and we want to give the player a reason to do more than just play the straight storyline, because we've built this huge, expansive world. We have a streaming engine, and we need to take advantage of that and give players, you know, bang for the buck outside of the story missions. I can't get too in-depth into missions that you guys haven't seen simply because of our release schedule, but what you saw was the tutorial to how those threat assessments work. You know, basically you had very one-off, simple things where you had a long time. You're going to see stuff where like there's multiple civilians in danger at the same time, and one civilian will maybe be in more danger, so the decay rate on their, you know, the meter that we have, what's called the threat assessment meter, will be going faster. So really the idea is the player stumbles across a scene, you know, a camera flash, we'll use some panels to show them all the danger, pan back to Spider-Man, and suddenly you're going to have to not only save these people, you're going to have to assess the situation. You're going to have 3 people trapped under a billboard, and, you know, explosions are going to be going off, and you need to figure out which person is in the most danger, because if you go in the wrong order, you may not save all the civilians. It's unacceptable for Spider-Man to ever let anybody die. So, you know, that's an automatic game over. So you'll have to come upon the scene, kind of do a quick analysis of who's in the most danger, and then work your way to figure out how you want to take the order of the saving. And Ultimate Spider-Man is coming out this fall. It'll be on the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, the Xbox, the PC, the GBA, and the Nintendo DS, and I certainly hope everybody goes and picks it up because it's a truly amazing game experience.
Wonderful. Thanks. Okay, this is Glenn Cristobal. I'm a tester from Activision Games, and I'm doing a demonstration of Ultimate Spider-Man from Treyarch and Activision. And this game utilizes a 3D comic inking technology, as you can see. Got real juicy colors, great art style, and it's based on the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book, hence a comic book look. So I'm going to swing through the streets of Queens, New York. This is going to be a free roaming game, and you'll be able to swing through Manhattan, through Queens, and okay, so I'm going to go down to Peter Parker's high school and show you our awesome motion graphics panels that we use for our cutscenes. Okay, so this is based on the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book, so it's an updated version of Spider-Man where Peter Parker's a web designer for the Daily Bugle, and it's been updated for a modern day audience. So what we have here is they find out that there's something on the loose and that Peter Parker should check it out. Spider-Man. Okay. So here I'm trying to catch up to what the source of the problem is. But in the meanwhile, I'm seeing that people are in danger, so I have to save them on time. While I make sure I don't get too far away from
I just need to pick him up and move him
what's
to
happening.
Easy stuff.
Alright, so you see the red outline, the green outline means he's safe. There's another motion panel scene. You see how the comic panels are integrated with the gameplay. Okay, so here, this is what we call a threat assessment meter. It's a timer that's ticking down, and basically you have to solve it on time or else you fail the mission. In later parts of the game, you may have to balance between which ones you do in order to get everything done on time.
Thank you.
Hurry up before the cops get here.
Alright, so these are the thugs that were stealing TVs just a minute ago. You have different moves. You have to zip them up in a web and so the cops can get them. So here's another person we have to rescue, and in this case, it's a multi-stage process. I have to pull the car off, and I have to get her out from the hole she's in. As soon as I get her out, the car goes right in the subway entrance. So I have to put her in a safe place, get the car out of the subway entrance, and then I'm gonna move on. So coming up is a really cool motion graphic sequence featuring the Rhino. It's another example of our comic panels, how they tell the story, they jump out the page and bring the story to life.
Hey you, is that a rhinoceros horn or you just happen to be...
And I just love this because Rhino is just like bigger than the page.
I'm so scared I can't finish my own joke.
So I'm all the way across pages and pages of comic book panels.
Don't worry, nothing's broken. It's my spine, a few ribs, everything else.
So Spider-Man jumps from one panel to the other and resumes the action. And this goes on. Eventually he hits a bot. He goes into a confrontation with the Rhino, but I'm going to show you another part of the game, which is that you can play as Venom. Venom is almost half of this game. Give you another look at our character design, our 3D comic inking technology for the characters. Notice the morphing eye texture right there. So Venom's a little different from Spider-Man. He's got different moves. He's got a locomotion jump. He can propel himself forward. And he's just generally a bad guy. His suit is draining his energy. So in order to get his energy back, he feeds on citizens. He can generally wreak havoc, throw cars, climbs the walls. He can do some damage on our walls. Come right up, and I'll show you another sequence, another comic book sequence. This time for a mission that's going to feature Venom. So that's Peter Parker. He notices something's going on, and it's Electro. So Peter Parker notices that Venom's fighting Electro, and he goes in as Spider-Man to go after Electro. He's a little jealous that he's fighting Venom.
Wait a second, are you fighting another superhero on the side? I thought you and me had something special. I bet it's Daredevil, isn't it? What does he have?
I did it. I finally got
Okay,
that
so
little
now Spider-Man is down, and Electro wants to
Finish
get
this
him,
up.
but Venom wants to get him too. So what ends up happening is a battle
like hell.
over who gets to fight Spider-Man. And I want to add that the story for this Ultimate Spider-Man game was written by Brian Michael Bendis, the original writer of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book series. Use Big Ball and notice the physics on the cars from the electricity damage. So he's gonna go up. He notices that he's in trouble, so he's gonna charge up on the blue sign here.
We're gonna do it right.
Power himself up, and this is gonna be the second part of the boss battle.
That's more like it.
So now Venom can't touch him, and he has to find another way to defeat Electro. So, let's try a car. Can I hit him with a car? Yes, I can. He goes. He gets out of his suit for a second. I get a chance to wail on him. Comes back. Another way I could do it is water. The Electro is vulnerable to water. See, he falls down. Back like that again. Get another chance to get out of it. Alright, this is Ultimate Spider-Man. As you can see, it's got a wonderful graphical style with our 3D comic book inking, our 3D motion graphics panels. You can play a Spider-Man and Venom, and it's going to have the largest cast of characters, Marvel cast of characters in a Spider-Man game. So it's a can't wait title, for sure. And I hope you enjoyed it.
He's a different kind of hero.
There's something about a guy who's swinging across town on a spider web.
The idea of a superhero with everyday problems is revolutionary today as it was when he came up with it.
My publisher, Martin Goodman, he hated everything about it. He wouldn't let me publish it.
It totally revolutionized the comic book industry.
Who fights crime in a very special city.
What we really wanted to do was bring you Spider-Man's New York.
His name is Spider-Man. And when Activision and Treyarch set out to make the biggest Spider-Man game of all time,
By the time this game is done, well over 100 people will have had their hands on this project.
We have more supervillains and superheroes than any previous Spider-Man game.
the results are spectacular. This is the making of Ultimate Spider-Man. It's the early 1960s, and Marvel Comics wants Stan Lee to create a new superhero.
Well, I had been doing comics for so long, came up with the Fantastic Four, then I did the Hulk, and they were both very successful, so my publisher, Martin Goodman, he said, hey, come up with another superhero. So I thought of Spider-Man, and I told him about it, and man, he hated it. He said, Stan, people hate spiders. That's no name for a hero. Then when I told him I wanted him to be a teenager, he said, don't you know anything about what a superhero should be? He hated everything about it. He wouldn't let me publish it.
But Lee decides to go ahead with his story about a teenager named Peter Parker who gains amazing powers after being bitten by a radioactive spider.
We had a magazine called Amazing Fantasy, and we were going to drop it. When you're about to drop a magazine, nobody cares what you put in the last issue. So I featured Spider-Man on the cover and had a story of Spider-Man. Well, when the sales figures came in, that had been our best-selling magazine of the whole year. So Martin walked into me. He said, you know, Stan, do you remember that Spider-Man character of yours that we both liked so much? Why don't you make it a series? That's how it happened.
In 1963, the web-crawling hero gets his own comic book.
Spider-Man proved to be a very popular character in the 1960s. He had had his own book, which was Amazing Spider-Man, for the longest time.
Spidey's adventures are brought to life by Stan Lee and artist Steve Ditko.
Stan was scripting all this stuff, and Steve plotted most of it, and Stan dialogued it. Together it was something magical.
Steve Ditko's artwork had almost a Picasso feel to it. It was almost cubist, and if you look compared to other comic books of that time, no one's ever imitated him. It's a very unique look to it.
Steve Ditko pretty much created everything cool about Spider-Man. All of his major foes were created during Steve Ditko's run. Right on down the line, from the Green Goblin to the Vulture to Dr. Octopus and Sandman.
Everything about Spider-Man, from his costume to his alter ego Peter Parker, draws in readers, and comic book fans can't get enough.
Stan Lee really rocketed into fame for creating heroes that had flaws, that had a real life, that had a personality beyond the cape and cowl, beyond the spandex.
One of the things that made Peter Parker really so very successful is what my publisher objected to. It was all the problems.
He's Peter Parker first, and it's kind of Spider-Man second. He's a younger character, so who's got real-world problems. He lives alone with his aunt, and he goes to high school, and he's got a girlfriend, and he tries to balance all these real-world things that kids and society just relate to.
The idea of a superhero with everyday problems, as revolutionary today as it was when he came up with it. I mean, it's so mundane in a way, but it totally revolutionized the comic book industry.
He forever kind of changed the way we look at heroes.
At the heart of the Spider-Man mythos is a key lesson.
With great power comes great responsibility. Really think about that. You could actually live by that code, and only that code, with no religion in your life, and live a very fulfilling life. It's an amazing idea.
The Spider-Man phenomenon just keeps growing.
At some point, they decided, this guy is a mark of quality. We gotta do something more with him.
And soon, the name Peter Parker will become more well-known than Marvel ever expected. After more than 40 years of crime fighting, Spider-Man has become a household name. Comic book artists such as Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson gain notoriety from their work on the Spider-Man comics. The friendly neighborhood web-slinger spawns numerous comics and 2 blockbuster films.
Oh, you didn't have to be a genius to realize how successful Spider-Man was. Well, the book sold like there was no tomorrow.
Soon after the turn of the new century, Marvel launches Ultimate Spider-Man, a modern retelling of the classic hero.
With the Ultimate books, we're able to just start over from scratch. It's about our world and our times, but still about the classic magic of a Marvel comic.
It was exciting to take the Ultimate approach to the character, where he's younger and he's dealing with kind of different things.
Peter Parker in the Ultimate series is a web designer, not a photographer. He deals with a lot of current day issues. When the comic was first conceived by Stan Lee in the early 60s, there are a lot of issues that might not resonate as well with teens today. So we've actually taken the storylines from the Ultimate comic book series, which is really updated to modern day.
Ultimate Spider-Man becomes a smash hit for Marvel. And it soon catches the attention of Activision.
We looked at what was going on in comic books today, and really Ultimate Spider-Man, the comic book from Marvel, was the #1 seller in Spider-Man comic books right now. So that's what we really wanted to go after.
Activision enlists Treyarch to create a game based on the new series.
Treyarch and Activision started working together in the late 1990s on a couple Tony Hawk games for the Dreamcast. They also did a Spider-Man game for a Dreamcast. Treyarch was the perfect fit.
Activision approached us in April of 2003 with the idea that they wanted to do a Spider-Man game based more on the classic Spider-Man comic book license versus the movie games. We have been the company that's done both of the Spider-Man movie games.
Development of Ultimate Spider-Man begins in June 2003. To ensure that they do justice to the series, Treyarch turns to the people behind the comics for guidance.
One of the first things that we wanted to do was to go after some of the talent that was involved in the creation of the comic book for Marvel. So we went after Brian Michael Bendis. We wanted to bring him in very early on and have him help to craft our story.
Bendis is great. He is so synonymous with Marvel now. He writes so much of our stuff, from Spider-Man to Pulse to Daredevil. Brian is the epitome of Marvel.
They presented us with an idea for the game that was so loyal to the comic book. It was so flattering.
We also wanted to involve Mark Bagley, who is the sole illustrator of all the Ultimate Spider-Man books. So we brought him in, had him do all of our character concepts.
Mark Bagley is a wildly underestimated artist.
The nice thing about Bagley's look is it's kind of a more clean, stylized look. That's what makes it a really easy transition for the guys at Treyarch to make his look work in 3D.
To attain a look that stays true to the comic books, Treyarch implements an entirely new graphic style.
The look was the first thing that jumped out at us. The Ultimate Spider-Man, it doesn't look like any of the previous Spider-Mans. It doesn't look like the movie. It's its own entity, and we really wanted to capture that because it was very exciting and it was very new.
Ultimate Spider-Man's really sort of like Spider-Boy. He's still in high school, and so he's got sort of this egg-shaped head and a thinner neck and these elongated features.
So we spent a lot of time examining all of the books at that time, trying different techniques to try and capture that look. We didn't want a Saturday morning cartoon look. We wanted something that was what modern comics are today.
So we wrote a new shader from the ground up. It's a combination of texture maps and our own shader technology. We use a very high polygon model to achieve the inking style. These characters are up to 7,000 polygons. He's closer to 9,000 polygons.
3D comic inking technology is something we created here in-house. What it does is it creates this comic feel for the game. When you see the characters, they're just more three-dimensional. There's more depth, there's more shadows. You're seeing these characters as if you're really standing right in front of them.
A new approach to graphics isn't all Treyarch does to capture the feel of the comics.
In looking at comics to see what we wanted to try to bring, we examined them, and some of the obvious things that came out were panels and storytelling.
You have to have panels. That's what the comic book medium is about.
The motion graphics panels really drive not only our story, but they drive gameplay as well. So as Spider-Man, for instance, is swinging down the street and we've got a person trapped under a burning car, you'll have a panel that will fly up on the screen and then seamlessly integrate itself right back into gameplay.
She's getting crushed. I don't have much time.
Let the player know that there's a situation that they need to deal with.
So panels are popping up while you're playing. Kind of give the player hints and clues or close-ups on the villain's face when they're having kind of a long-distance conversation. It really frees you up and
really adds to the immersive quality of the overall gaming experience.
Now that the technical aspects of the game are nailed down, Treyarch must work on making Ultimate Spider-Man live up to its name. Treyarch is set on making Ultimate Spider-Man the biggest and most ambitious Spider-Man game ever made. To pull it off, they'll stretch every resource they have to the limit.
It's a pretty amazing thing, the scope of a project like this. We are currently staffed at 85 people on this project. We have a group of around 12 to 15 animators, 17 programmers, 7 production staff members, 15 game designers. We have a whole team of 3D modelers who create all the geometry for the game, and then a whole subgroup of that of guys who do the 2D artwork. We have a special effects team, a whole audio department. By the time this game is done, well over 100 people will have had their hands on this project.
Well, there's definitely a collaborative process that goes on between our lead designer, Brian Reed, and our creative director, Chris Bussey, and Brian Michael Bendis. They kicked around some ideas for what a storyline was. We had extensive research at Activision, what the most popular Spider-Man characters are. One of the ones that just sort of rose to the surface was Venom.
When we introduced Ultimate Venom into the comic book, our sales spiked. They almost doubled. It was shocking, because we were doing all right to start with. I had no idea that Venom was that popular.
We decided that we wanted to use Venom and do a Venom storyline.
When Peter Parker was a boy, his dad and his best friend Eddie Brock's dad worked together to create what's called the Venom suit, and it was supposed to be a cure for cancer.
And they created this hideous, monstrous suit that feeds off of the living force of people, turns you into a superhuman, but also makes you just uncontrollable. They tried to destroy their work because it was going to be turned into a weapon. Eddie Brock's father saved a little piece of it for his son to find, sort of his legacy. Both of their parents died under mysterious, tragic circumstances, and that really kind of sets them off on their different paths.
10 years later, Eddie has found a sample of the suit, and it's been part of his college work to do research on it. Eddie puts on the suit. He becomes permanently bonded to it and becomes Venom.
Eddie loves the power. He craves the darkness. Instead of wanting to get rid of the suit, he wants to learn how to control the suit and really be the supreme evil.
So that's what happened in the comic book. Where we come into the story, it's 3 months later. Eddie Brock is still loose in New York with Venom on him and is completely out of control. And as the two come back together, this mystery of how the suit came into being, what happened to Peter Parker and Eddie Brock's parents. So we have all these questions that have never been answered that we get to tell everybody for the first time.
To truly tell the tale of Venom and Spider-Man, Treyarch makes Venom a playable character.
We definitely wanted to have that be a big part of the game. There's this central storyline that's going on, and there were key points where if you only knew it from the Spidey side,
I guess there's no such thing as a slow day when you're a big-time superhero.
you would never get what was going on. And so it was essential that we had you play from the Venom side.
It shows the connection between our two playable characters that wasn't gone into as much depth in the comic book storyline.
I love playing Spider-Man. I mean, it's fun to swing around, but the idea of destruction and being this kind of massively big, violent, very strong character that can really wreak havoc in the city is very exciting, really fun, and that's a pretty cool thing for a video game.
As fun as it is to be Spider-Man and swing around the city and to save people, and the antithesis of that, there's a hedonistic pleasure breaking things and destroying things and blowing stuff up and eating people.
We wanted both sides to be playable, but different.
Or there's just totally different locomotion and combat systems for each player. Spider-Man is very graceful, he's agile, his combat's frenetic, he's acrobatic, he's fast, he jumps off the walls. He's everything you expect a young 15-year-old spaz to be able to do after being bit by a radioactive spider.
It's more frenetic. It's fast, it's in, it's out. It's off walls, off light posts, off guys.
On the other hand, you got Venom, who's this hulking, enormous, he's heavy, he's slow, he punches holes in things. There's a tremendous sense of weight.
Venom's got kind of this super jump. And he's about being monstrous and taking guys out with one swing, using his tentacles to wrap people up and feed on them.
And he consumes them inside of his body, and he spits them out unconscious and covered in slime laying on the sidewalk. It really just balances out the gameplay for us.
Spider-Man and Venom won't be alone. Treyarch has virtually limitless access to the legendary Marvel Universe, and they're gonna take full advantage of it. Set out to make the mother of all Spider-Man games with Ultimate Spider-Man. A big part of their goal is to include as many cameo appearances as possible. The list of heroes and villains who will appear in their game is awe-inspiring.
Of all the Spider-Man games that have come out, this is going to be the largest slate of supervillains in any of the previous Activision Spider-Man games.
We were going to grab everything we could at Marvel and throw it into this game. We've got Johnny Storm. We have got just this pile of Marvel heroes in our game.
We're introduced to tons of characters in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Some we've already met before, some we've never seen in the Ultimate book before, that people have actually been dying for, like Ultimate Beetle and Ultimate Silver Sable is going to be a big one. But plus tons of cameos. You got Nick Fury's in it, Mary Jane's in it.
The Ultimate, franchise opens up a new take on all these bad guys. The Ultimate Rhino looks very different from Rhino from the classic series. These These are characters you've heard about over the years in the Marvel Universe, but you're seeing them kind of again and new for the first time, which is pretty cool.
The biggest challenge is to make sure that everybody is their own special kind of unique thing. Rhino is 3 stories tall and charging through Queens, knocking down buildings, throwing cars at Spider-Man during their boss fight. Then when you fight Green Goblin, you're chasing him through the streets of New York again, but their fight ends up crashing through the roof. And they end up fighting in the Grand Hall there. And it's fireballs everywhere and Spider-Man fighting the Green Goblin.
We have more interactive superheroes and supervillains than any previous Spider-Man game.
One of the things that's really nice about the Ultimate Spider-Man brand is that it really centers a lot around Peter and his life. So we bring those characters to life in the game as well. So we're really able to kind of dig deeper into Peter and his interactions with the people around him.
Heroes and villains aren't all that's packed into Ultimate Spider-Man.
What we really want to do is bring you Spider-Man's New York. Means you get to go to all of the landmarks that Spider-Man could go to. You get to go to Queensboro Bridge, where Green Goblin nearly killed Mary Jane.
We actually sent a couple of our artists to New York during pre-production to go and photograph all over New York. We photographed textures and just little things like manhole covers, signs going into like Little Italy and Chinatown, and taking pictures to get those flavors.
Queens is where Peter lives with his Aunt May. It's where he goes to high school. So it was just kind of the logical step to take for us to expand this environment to include Queens. It just gives the player the freedom to kind of go anywhere they want in this city and be that heroic Spider-Man character.
As the September 2005 release date for Ultimate Spider-Man draws near, development begins to wrap up. The people at Treyarch and Activision look back at what they've accomplished and are confident that the game represents their best efforts.
Mostly, I'm really excited about the story we get to tell and the events that we get to do and the fact that we actually fit into the comic book continuity. For this little brief moment in time, I actually get to touch Peter Parker's life and do something to it is really the coolest part of this project for me.
The stuff that we're doing in this is going to be carried on. Bendis is going to carry those storylines in the comic book, and he's going to be making sure that stuff that's happening in the comics are at least tangentially related to what's going on in the game.
It's always a challenge to take what you start out with ideas and designs and to actually make them come to life in the game. And that's really a testament to the talent that we have over here at Treyarch.
This was one of the best experiences I've ever had. And there's so many people involved. When we create the comic book, it's just a handful of people, whereas there's so many developers and special effects guys. I was just kind of bracing myself for this thing to kind of lose its edge, and it never ever did, and it was a really awesome experience.
Marvel is so lucky to have Activision doing these games. I was really sucked into the world of Spider-Man while I was watching that game. It's unbelievable. I think that these video games are just about the greatest kind of entertainment you could find anywhere.
Everything that we've done in Ultimate Spider-Man the game is based around the notion that we want to bring this comic book experience to life.
This game's really about bringing you inside the comic book and showing you that world.
We were looking at the Spider-Man games that we were doing and the Spider-Man games that we wanted to do, and we were working with Sony on the movie games at the time. We had originally done ones based out of the comic books, and we wanted to get back to that. And so we looked at what was going on in comic books today, and really Ultimate Spider-Man, the comic book from Marvel, was the hot thing.
So one of the first things that we wanted to do was to go after some of the talent that was involved in the creation of the comic book for Marvel. So we went after Brian Michael Bendis. We wanted to bring him in very early on and have him help to craft our story.
We basically had the attitude at the start of this game that we were going to grab everything we could at Marvel and throw it into this game. Everything that Spider-Man has run into, we wanted to try and use. Stuff that previous Spider-Man games couldn't.
It's just a massive project.
There's something you don't see every day.
Picking the creative team, it's a long process. It's an involved process.
We have a group of around 12 to 15 animators. We have 17 programmers. We have 7 production staff members. We have 15 game designers. We have a whole team of 3D modelers who create all the geometry for the game, and then a whole subgroup of that of guys who do the 2D artwork that paint and light and make the city beautiful. And by the time this game is done, well over 100 people have had their hands on this project.
Our motion graphics panel system is something that really is an immersive quality in the game. From cutscenes right into gameplay, you're really experiencing this living, interactive comic book experience.
We have the biggest array of supervillains and superheroes in any previous Spider-Man game ever.
One of the ones that just sort of rose to the surface through this entire process was Venom.
We go deeper into what causes Venom's origin. Where the comic book covers Spider-Man's genesis, this really goes deeper into the background of how Spider-Man and Venom, as Peter Parker and Eddie Brock, and their mutual fathers as scientists, are intimately intertwined, and how their origins are very much similar, and they're kind of one of the same being.
For years, we've always wanted to do more, and it's always been a really popular thing that the kids wanted. They always want to play as the bad guy, too.
So like all the other Spider-Man games, of course, you're playing Spider-Man. And that means that we get to have Spidey on screen, and you get to bounce off walls, you get to punch the bad guys, you get to swing on your webs, you get to do all these cool things. Well, the first time ever, we get to play the bad guy as well.
So really, the genesis of it is there's 2 video games. There's a Spider-Man video game with a totally unique set of locomotion and combat, and there's a Venom video game with a totally unique set of locomotion and combat. We design a game around each of these guys.
Really, the flip side of being able to play as Venom adds such a different element to the game, and really makes it's so interesting to play both sides of the story. I think it's a cool story element and a really cool player control element as well.
The ability to pick up a car and throw it down the street, to knock off other big villains, to actually pick up a pedestrian and suck all the life out of them is fun. So Venom's the man, or the beast.
When we set out to create this living comic book experience, there were really kind of 2 things that were going to drive that for us, really kind of at the forefront. And one of them was the look of the game, as far as the look of the characters and the look of the environment. So we derive what we call 3D comic inking technology, and it's basically as if you had taken the characters out of the comic book, ripped them off the pages, and thrown them into a 3D gaming world.
In looking at comics to see what we wanted to try to bring to the game, we examined them, and so we went through, and some of the obvious things that came out were panels and storytelling, and comic books use sequential imagery of panels to sort of tell a story. And what we wanted to do was use that in our animation, in our cutscenes, and giving information over to the player. We could bring these panels in and move them into the frame of play.
In this day and age where we can do these multi-pass effects on characters, it's a very cool effect, and as we've shown it around to people at Marvel or elsewhere, it's hugely impactful. I mean, they really get a sense that it's a unique look.
3D comic inking technology is something we created here in-house, And when you see the game and you see kind of the different shadows on each individual character, you'll notice that there are different gradations of shadows as you rotate the character around. What it does is it creates this, not only this comic feel for the game, but this more immersive style that's kind of more in-depth.
It really articulates the musculature of the character and the style and the shape of the character, so it's a really just cool looking effect.
I'm definitely more like Peter Parker.
I'm more like Peter Parker.
I think I'm more like a Peter Parker just because at the end of the day, I like to think of myself as the person who comes in and swings through difficult situations and saves the day.
Oh, this hurts already.
I like the dark side of things. I'm a good guy on the upfront, but I certainly like getting in trouble.
Depends on what time of day you talk to me.
I think that depends upon whether or not I've had my coffee in the morning.